Now, is Ito still here?
Oh, yeah, he's right.
Yes.
Ito, so let's talk about Boscovich.
Well, I haven't studied up on anything, so please start. With
well, I sent away for the book by the fellow that gave the talk, who did the translation of the Boscovich material from Serbian, and it's very interesting. I mean, his diagrams of these force fields, how they alternate attraction, repulsion with infinite repulsion at very, very close distances.
Right.
And it applies to things like fluid dynamics, and it just applies to all kinds of things. And especially nuclear forces.
Welcome to the July 31st edition of the Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we have David, Jim, Cameron, Buddy, Richard, Robert, Edwin, and Jake. We will be talking about Boscovich and his atomic discoveries, how this applies to Birkeland Currents in our solar system, and other high-tech applications. Please like and subscribe below.
It's sort of like he was the original one to come up with a reason for there to be different electron bands, you know, which became the Bohr model. So he was really the original. He had the original inspiration that led to the atomic model we have, and applying his principles down at the nuclear level, I think it would fit into what you're doing. I think it would. It would
just might.
It would benefit you to look at the material I sent you by email.
Right. Yeah, I have it here. I'm looking at that figure, if you will.
Okay.
I haven't figured it out, mind you, but I see what you mean there. It's almost like a Birkeland current thing or a double layer thing, the alternating.
Yes, exactly. It could explain double layers and lots of stuff.
Well, it might actually have a lot to do with that, and that's a very interesting topic. I can promise you that through the two conferences now, including with Jan Emming, what we can see is this double layer stuff could be actually very crucial phenomena for many people, from how a sun functions to how fusion happens.
Okay,
so
good.
That's a very interesting thing. So it's nice that you pointed out as well here.
So if you respond to my email with your address, your physical address, I ordered a copy of the book for myself, which I've got, but I could order a copy of it for you too. Send it to you.
That'd be very nice.
Yes. So just respond to my email with an address, and I'll do it. It wasn't that expensive, but I just soon do it for you.
Well, it could be a very important topic indeed, because there's something. Well, this, of course, in my mind, must have to do with the structure in the atom, right? And what we're looking at is the fundamental part. The fundamental building block would be the deuterium, so two protons, one electron in between, one on the outside, if you will.
Right.
And building with that as a Lego block, right? Like a building block, like a brick.
Right. Right.
It's almost like that, kind of, sort of.
And also just even the fact that the electrons and protons exist in a certain structure, and his curves would have to do with that close relationship between the electrons and the protons, and also as to why the electron and proton fly apart when they're ejected as a so-called neutron. So all of that would be relevant.
Right. So what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to show you, give you something back in return here for the for understanding for the people.
Okay,
here.
Thank you.
So when you look at the atom, as I depicted, you've all seen the pictures there from a carbon, for example, with the nice icosahedron sphere. It consists. It is made up of 6 pairs, if you will. Now, on the outside, you get half a charge on both sides. or rather that's where the outer electrons connect to. So the outer electrons are more like loops, almost like solar flare loops, those kind of things. That's more or less how I can now depict the orbital, if you will. And by deciphering the structure, we should be able to, that's kind of what I'm getting at, we should be able to make the correlation, of course, to the observed orbital structures that we have, right?
Good.
We need to find that correlation. That has to be there, right? Everything has to be there, but so I think it's a nice topic there, Richard. I'll definitely look into it more.
Okay.
All right.
When did this gentleman live?
Boscovich?
Yeah.
18th century. See,
Hey,
he was like 200 years before modern physics, but up until 1920, he was cited by Bohr and all kinds of people as, one of the sources of their thinking. But after 1920, they stopped mentioning him.
So he's their hero, their giant that they were standing on the shoulders of.
Yes.
Isn't that always the way?
This gentleman I'm seeing now, when he was alive, 1711 to 1787. That's quite a while ago.
Yeah.
Talk about pioneer.
Absolutely. Well, listen, David, I could send you a copy of that message right now if you want to bring anything up.
Yeah, let's do it. So okay. then we have a collective area to discuss, and I'm just getting done.
I'll stop sharing the screen because I just didn't want to see the blue one.
Yeah, no problem. I'll grab it back here.
I've got a few comments on the background on when people are watching this. They were like, "Well, please put something there,"
Oh, right. Okay.
So this was just one of the recent posts that was up on the EU Geology page. I just pulled up the article and just been showing I think this was David Brown's post. Mentioned this article here. But yeah, we'll just end this off and go back to the other article that Richard was talking about.
I think it's me right now. You can see me.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Getting it from all. Okay. So, Boscovich, did you send that?
Yeah, I just sent it.
Okay.
It's been sent. It says "Hi Ito" at the top. I didn't change the text. I just sent one to you.
That sounds Japanese.
Haido.
Okay.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Let me get it.
Okay. Now, my way of getting other people's addresses is by going to my messages from David.
Yeah. No, oh man, there's some really cool stuff right here. I mean, immediately pick up on. Right.
Good.
Yeah. Did you see it? Did you see the image that Richard sent over?
Yes.
Yeah.
So his sort of that figure. Well, there's the two little ones at the top, and then the first one that goes all the way across is kind of his main general model.
The amazing stuff with this is it ties into sound. It's all actually all motion.
Yeah. Well, you could see those loops. So the way what that curve means is that above the line is a repulsion. Below the line is a attraction, and then the axis going left to right is the distance between the two particles.
Mm-hmm.
So it shows that, at this close, it becomes infinitely repulsive as they get real close.
Mm-hmm.
But then it becomes attractive again on the other side of that, which should sort of be like, I guess, when a proton gets into the nucleus, gets past that infinite repulsion.
I understand this is reflecting to the nucleus or the atom, if you will. But what I see is more like a planetary thing going on. Between planets, if you will, planets or stars or whatever.
It would apply to that. And it seems to apply to everything. No, go ahead.
This is the scalar aspect of all this. Yeah. What's
those could be double layer. Each of those. Well, so the stable points are where the curve comes down and continuing on to the right. So if you're at that point, if you go up, it becomes repulsive, so you're pushed back, and if it's down, it's attractive, and so you go back up. And that's exactly what happens along from magnetic forces of planets going around the sun. They're all sort of in a plane, and when they go above the plane, they're pushed back into it. When they go below the plane, they're pushed back into it. So that's kind of like one of those crossings.
Well, was he specifically addressing anything, or was he a generalist?
No, he says this applies to everything.
Yeah, nice. Right, exactly. Yeah, right.
Where he got it, I mean, how he came up with it, I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
It's in the book. It says that he was combining the Greek idea of an indivisible atom along with Newton's mechanics. And somehow that gave him this. So there's got to be more to it than that.
Right.
He probably studied lots of phenomenon of different kinds.
Yeah. Do you know his history at all? Like where, was he an acclaimed academic or?
He was famous in his time. The history is in the book. And let's see. Well, I'll send info on the book to you, and you can redistribute it.
Okay.
Okay. I forget how I looked it up, but a guy who gave a talk at the Bath conference, Ida was there. He is the very person who translated from the Serbian to English.
Wow. Okay.
And he's the one on that website link I gave. It's all there. Yeah, I gave a website link along with that image. Maybe you want to go there.
Okay.
Show that to us.
Unified field theory.
Yeah. Part of it right here on the website. What are those ads at the top?
Oh, this is the guy.
Yeah, there it is. There's a picture of him. Yeah.
There we go. Amazing.
Really? That's pretty far back to go to quarks. But
yeah. So, let's see. I'm going to see if it has the information on the book. Is it Roger Anderson?
Right. Anderton.
There it is. Roger Anderton. He's the one who gave the talk.
Okay.
In Bath.
Okay.
And he's the one who made the translation of the book. So I think on this website somewhere, say how to get the book. I'm not sure. I'll find it.
Field theory cover up. Yeah. I'll pop this into the chat for reference. Reason.
Oh, written by. This is
it. Yeah.
So I probably just ordered it off of Amazon or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, here. I'll pop this. This is a PDF that's out in the wild.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, very interesting.
Yeah.
Margaret Thatcher.
Is there an electromagnetic function in that curvature that we were just talking about, Neil?
Which part?
Yeah, figure 1 there. I mean, it resembles what Donald Scott talks about when the voltage potential from the sun. In my mind, I kind of see why the planets would be in those dippings, as Richard points out, right?
Right.
We actually...
The only thing
Go ahead.
Well, the only thing I don't understand... Okay, so his reasons for those being the spacings make sense. But then it seems like an extraordinary coincidence that the planet at that place... Well, no. Somehow it's confined. Why does it have exactly the right mass and velocity from a gravitational point of view to also work in that place? It's almost like it's forced there, and then its revolution speed is forced to conform somehow.
Yeah, I'm not against this, but there to imagine that there is some sort of there's some other mechanism that is self-balancing or self-correcting in this, it seems, because we've all seen the examples of, well, if we just go through more and more these gravitational things, and then planets will go flying off. They should go flying off, but they don't. That type of thing.
Right.
So I'm obviously convinced that just, there's probably more than just brushing the tails against each other too. But it's also neat that they are forced to go around this particular angle. So they're forced to go along this plane, more or less, as you can see.
Well, the sun. See, there's two gravitational fields involved. The sun's gravitational field is really dominant, and it's the one that forces them down into the plane.
You think?
But and then on the I checked it by the right hand rule or whatever when I was looking into these things, and so I mean it's traveling through a gravitational field, and if it goes above the plane, it gets pushed down. It goes below the plane, it gets pushed up. It's a moving charged particle.
Do you mean?
But then right on the plane, the sun's gravitational field is neutral. That's the one place where it doesn't have any effect.
I keep on thinking you're saying gravitation when you mean magnetic.
Oh, I meant magnetic. Did I say gravitation?
Yeah.
So the magnetic field of the magnetic field of the sun.
Yes.
dominates mostly in the heliosphere, and it's that field which constrains planets to the plane, more or less. I mean, some of them deviate from the plane, but there's a force pushing them toward the plane.
Yeah, they're weaker out there too.
And on the plane itself, the sun's field is neutral. It doesn't push the planets in or out or left or right or anything. And so on that plane, the magnetic field of the incoming Birkeland current, the one that comes vertically toward the sun,
right?
It can dominate on that plane, and so it's the Bessel function of that magnetic field which matches where the orbits are. See, so the orbits of the planets are at the Bessel function.
I see what you mean.
I do.
The Birkeland current connecting to the solar system can act on the solar plane level because the magnetic field of the sun is negated there.
That's right. Exactly.
Right.
See,
exactly. Now, and then you would think that bigger magnetic field would always dominate, but the thing is, because the sun is probably made of iron, that's like your iron core in your coil.
Oh yes,
which
it's
greatly
concentrated.
magnifies the magnetic. Yeah. So because of that core, that iron core, the sun's field becomes stronger than the one that actually creates it, the coil itself. But that coil itself, which is, the Birkeland currents coming in, can dominate on the plane. If I haven't lost people there.
You haven't lost me, although I've got to tell you, this video has given me new insights just by looking at it.
It's great, isn't it? Yeah, I got this like 2 days ago. Joe Maddow sent this over.
The reason I say that, stop right as soon as it gets there, like right there. Just pause it for a sec.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Now, I have to look at this not as the sun being an individual object. The sun is just the largest object. But do you not that all of those asteroids together form a cellular structure, that each one of them has their own magnetic or own electric fields, and each one of them is responding to as a unit, like the plane of the galaxy, very much similar in that regard. And obviously, there's gravitational influences in there. Jupiter's flying around, and a bunch of others. So we can't deny that. But just looking at it, just seeing it from this angle, seeing how much material, it's like a torus that's a physical thing. It's like a one object, electrically speaking.
Why would there be so many asteroid objects left? And I mean, there are a gazillion out there, right? Why would there be so many left when our solar system has already formed?
Well, the EU theory is that, yes, I think that it's like exploding planets or something.
Or the debris
of exploded planets. And then there's the, astronomers are always talking about collisions between galaxies, and collisions here and collisions there. But according to the electric model, there's actually reasons for things not to collide.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the thing that's striking to me are the velocities. It's like as you get in towards the center, it's pretty clear that, your frequencies are driving up radically from out here to in here.
That orange glow there, all of that material can transfer electrical charges from one side to the other, because they'll just pass between each of these rocks, like as if they were nuclei of atoms, and just passing down the chain, so to speak. That's pretty much a beautiful ring current, basically.
Right.
And you're looking down.
I'm looking at this as a node of it,
Yeah, look at it. Look how big that is compared to the sun and the orbits, and it seems like it is almost like the induced ring that comes from the sun. Like the sun's torus, the sun's rings. Right. Almost. I'm not quite there. Of course,
that's a good analogy. Yeah.
The one that keeps ringing. This one, I've looked at this before, but like not in specific application at all. Let me see if I can get to it so we can play with it a little bit. But this HTML5 stuff is really interesting. But yeah.
So what is that?
So this is just a sign of 1 over x, right? As you go in, you see how and you can kind of visual. This is not a very difficult thing to visualize, but you have your basic reciprocal here, right? But look at what happens when you dive into this thing, right? You see that going down in? This behavior is very similar to the frequency.
What's it oscillating for? I thought it just
sine x.
We're just seeing a mapped mathematical equation.
This is a mathematical equation, right?
What was the other one?
But it's just sine of x. It's just sine of x, but do the reciprocal instead, and you see what happens to the frequencies. And I'm just seeing a map on what we're talking about here. Let's see. Go back. Let's see.
Sine of 1 over x. I see.
Sine of 1 over x. Yeah.
What was the other one you were showing us there? The 1x, or the one that had the nice gentle curve that sort of matched the Birkeland Current model of Don Scott.
Yeah. Let's go. Yeah.
Well, that's a little bit lower.
Sine of x over x. So that was.
Yeah.
So that's. I knew you'd know it like right off the top of your head. Sine x over x.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's see.
No.
Let's see how. No, it is. If I get it, I have to scale it. There we go. Yeah. So then this is similar to what the Boscovich thing is.
Yeah, where you're getting a curve, and that curve determines, like, the sun would be at the 0 line, and then each of the planets, or so on the orbits.
Right. But the problem with this one is you have a constant period, right, going out. You see how it is, right?
Right.
But if you just put instead and just substitute 1 over x in there, you start getting a better mapping, better modeling, I believe personally, of what the behavior is.
Does this map?
Put a Bessel function in. Put a Bessel function in. That's right.
Yeah, but with the varying, I know. I mean, this is a go-to, but the one that always strikes me that's missing is this periodicity. The periodicity is a function of the radius.
Yeah, what you're looking at too is like the intensity of a laser light beam, the lobes in a laser light beam, where the intensity, that's how they fall off too. Most of it in that peak, and then nice equal spacing with radius.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what happens with planets, though. There's got to be something still different with.
Right.
Well, yeah, it's a Bessel function instead of a sine function.
But you get these, I mean, this is interesting too. See the spike that happens right at 0.
What's this one?
Once again, it's the sine 1 over x over x. Right,
oh my God!
But you see. But this is actually what as far as energetics go, this is what I'm seeing happening. You get this spike right in the center, and there's your focal point. This is why you get so much energy right in the center point. The sun,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but in Boscovich, you don't get this oscillating thing near the Earth. You just get the two sides go up to infinity from the left and the right without oscillations.
Uh-huh.
It's like if you cut out those central oscillations and just kept the see?
Yeah. It's really cool stuff. I mean, this stuff is in the air these days, it seems like.
Yeah, like that figure 1 too. If you look at that as the surface of the sun, you kind of see the same effect with solar arcades versus magnetic reconnection, where an arcade bursts at some radius. All of a sudden, the magnetic field in the mainstream description, magnetic field lines open out into space, and that's where all the charge flows. But it's the same.
Right. I mean, you get these the really.
And on the sun's surface, we know that there's double layers at least, though. So we know that shape on the sun does come from double layers.
And then are there double layers going out toward the corona and everything?
Yeah, there should be repeated double layers, but the strongest double layers will be at the solar surface from gravitational charge segregation too. So.
Well, I just linked a bunch of papers from Donald Scott there, which has some graphs there that might help. And he's talking about Bessel functions in there, in the last one anyway.
Right. So he just by using the, I don't know what the name of the, just standard understood formulas of gravitational fields, and given the main current in the Birkeland current, he derived that it would be Bessel functions that forms, sort of sleeves containing the different cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely a possibility there. I'm just not sure if I would see it that way, because a lot of that, like for example, at the orbit of Jupiter, Jupiter would be pulling in a lot more, I would think, than just that one ring that's on it. It would be pulling in material like energy from nearby rings. It's just it has such a large magnetic field itself. I can't state that for sure, of course, but these are things that I think of, the general chaoticness, but yet somehow in an order. I don't doubt that these rings have order somehow, the planets, but I'm still not sure how, since they are themselves just point masses and points moving along in an orbit, the other material around them, like it would try to steal electricity from that torus around the sun of the asteroid belt. In fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there are stories that have been brought up by Symbols of an Alien Sky that depict what happened when it crossed that, and it was blowing things away in a huge electrical storm type of thing. But
well, I think that was in the context of a huge electrical discharge event going on in the solar system. I mean, I saw one image trying to explain the polar configuration where the field was so strong it completely lined up all the planets in a line.
Yeah, I think we talked about that, yeah.
Yeah, forget about orbits and gravity. It's just suddenly all the planets were forced along one Birkeland current.
Well, this is the type of thing that makes me think about that whole, the North Pole has moved that we talked about the other day.
Now, that's amazing stuff.
Yeah. But the one I don't see, and maybe someone can get me in a better, perception of this, but no counter rotation here.
I think only one planet counter rotates, as that's Venus.
Uh-huh.
I don't mean direction, though. It just meant spin.
Yeah, but I mean, according to the model, maybe I'm incorrect in interpreting it.
No, not rotate. No. Venus is counter-rotating on its axis.
Yes,
but it goes around the sun in the same direction as all the other.
Right.
And so I think that would indicate that we're all within. That all the planets are within the first rotating Birkeland current, and we haven't come to the one that counter-rotates. It'd be out beyond. In fact, the whole heliosphere looks like it's within just the core rotating Birkeland current.
But this is where I start seeing vortice action pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Did you guys see there's some information about Japan talking about capturing an asteroid and bringing it to Earth?
I think it's China, but yes.
No. Oh, was it China?
Yeah. China, yeah.
I saw that. I was like, yep, this is happening. This can't be good. They have movies about this, yeah.
How are they doing it?
What if we can't stop it?
Oh, it's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Especially if it's charged.
Because unless they understand about the electric charge, they're going to get a huge discharge event when it gets close.
Shanghai is going to be a crater.
Oh my! Oh yeah! Jesus.
Has anyone the space elevator? I'm thinking space elevator all of a sudden.
Oh, the test.
Yeah. Is that have they pulled off any actual construction on anything of that nature?
No.
No, as far as I know, they haven't, and they're not going to, because it has to do with graphene, and we're not far enough in our graphene research thus far to start building bridges. As far as I understand, we can't even get more than a few. I think it was a few yards. That's as long as we can get so far of sheets of it. But there's a graphene center in most colleges now. It's one of the biggest and hottest things.
Yeah.
But one of the things in the Boscovich book is about how long molecules get created. Well, graphene, that's a plane, isn't it? It's not a long molecule.
It's a single, yes. It's according to the model, it's one single molecule,
right? And
of carbon.
Oh yeah, a multi-molecule. But they talk about that extensively in Boscovich's book.
Mm-hmm.
Polymerization. He talks about polymerization, and then this is kind of a special case of polymerization.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a crystal, but it can move.
It's super strong.
Conducts electricity.
And it happens under pressure. Under the right pressure and the right temperature, which I'm sure is part of the graphene production process. Because it forces the molecules into a certain part of that Boscovich curve where they meet up. And of course, Ito would have a lot to say about that as well, I'm sure.
I'd like to see the that one where they do where they show you like this is the blackest black that any black can be, and it's made of this stuff. You're basically looking at a bunch of tubes, looking down at the tubes, and it just absorbs all light. You can't. I mean, it looks like the absence of stuff. Your brain actually breaks a little. You know.
Wow.
So why does it absorb all light?
Because it's basically a bunch of these graphene tubes that you're looking down at, and there's nothing to reflect. They just all light disappears into them. So
that would make them but it doesn't make them invisible.
Yeah,
it absorbs light from both sides.
It's just as black can be. Trust me, just look up the Blackest Black. It's made of graphene. It's just nasty.
No, I believe you. Yeah, I believe you.
It's crazy. But the stuff they can do, like making little buckyballs and other things, I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic new future material.
Weren't they planning on using that as one of the exhibits at one of the Olympics? They were going to make some kind of art presentation with that material.
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
It's talking
they have like some
display technology,
like nothing but that black stuff, and then they have all these lights set up like star constellations. It's going to be like their theme for art renditions at one of the Olympics.
I wonder if this will sort of disappear the same way that other material disappeared. That British guy came on television. He goes, "Here's a material I put on top of this eggshell, and I'm going to put it in front of this blowtorch." So I put it in front of this blowtorch, and then he went through the entire procedure, showing how awesome this material will shield against heat. Right? I mean, like 99.999% of heat will not go through it. So there's nothing you can do about that. So at the end of the day, they went and got that egg, cracked the egg open. Wasn't even boiled. It was wet. It was not cooked. So and then of course it was like, this material could be great. I wonder who has ideas. Disappears from view. No one hears about it again. I was like, gee. I wonder what the military found. You know, well, no, the military.
No, the Russians did it, and they built it into their hypersonic, their new hypersonic weapons.
It makes me wonder about the.
That's what they did. That's what they used to hack Elastic Buck.
When you talk about the hypersonic thing, I keep on thinking about that vehicle that they made, the hypersonic plane that was supposed to go Mach 25, and why it seems to, for some reason, flip over and crash whenever they test it. And I keep on thinking, well, you know, you have how much electricity is being generated across that whole fuselage, you know, that type of thing, and then whether or not it responds to one pole or the other and flips the plane. Because
the plane is going to have wings and all kinds of things, but they have a missile, you know.
Ooh, a hypersonic missile?
Which travels in a comparatively dense part of the atmosphere, and when they show images of it, it's like glowing orange.
Wow. Has its own aura around it, its own coma.
Let's see. Is there a picture of it? Oh, yeah. I think it's the one third down on the left.
This one?
Oh no, the second. No, it's the second one on the left. Second one. There it is.
Oh yeah, I've seen this. Yeah,
that's the Russian hypersonic missile. So you see how it is a minimum.
It's like a Star Trek
air controls. Yeah, and supposedly this is like being tested and stuff already.
Well, they did talk about the anti-missile system, and that the only way that you're going to be able to avoid the anti-missile system to rebalance, because the way that things tend to go is that once someone has a surefire way of protecting against someone, then they're going to attack them, right? So in this instance, it's best to have a counter to the anti-ballistic missile thing. Like, sure,
exactly,
yeah, and it makes sense. In a Cold War insanity kind of way.
And it's also maneuverable. It's like, not only does it go hypersonic, but it can change course all the time and move around and change altitudes. And so there's no way to predict
where it's going to be and how to hit it.
Yeah,
I like
exactly.
that.
Plus it's going probably faster than your missile, you know. So you'd be trying to lead it like you lead moving target with a bullet.
And it's dodging. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's dodging. So it's
difficult.
So it's designed to tell the United States, no, you are not going to succeed in a first strike and get by with it. That's its whole purpose. It's really defensive, not offensive.
Makes sense.
It's an amazing amount of energy just for posturing.
Well, what can you do? It makes. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not like in love with Russians or anything, but at the end of the day, they know the ball game. They know what they're playing against. I mean, you can't expect them to sit back. I mean, it's just like when Canada goes, "We're going to do tariffs." Like in response, it's like, what do you expect?
And keep in mind that Russia spends a tiny, probably 10% of what the U.S. spends on defense. I mean, on military. So they're getting a much bigger bang for their buck.
Well, actually, that was talked about before. How the Russians dealt with certain things, like when they mailed torpedoes to the shores to fishing communities and told them how to build fins for it. And then how to fire them at incoming. If you see a German ship out there, fire this at them. And then we have all these amazing tanks. Yeah, but we have the bazooka, so now we don't need. We can kill your fancy tank. It's just an effective counter, and I like that thing.
Right.
Just find an effective, cheap counter to your problem. It might not be perfect, but
I mean, it's moved into fourth gen warfare where it's all psychological.
Well, it was psychological before, wasn't it?
Well, that's not. I mean, they tout fourth gen, right?
You're saying CNN is more powerful than a cruise missile,
in a way,
kind of thing.
I think
you know what I mean. I mean that's sort of what you're saying.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about the entire dispersion, ultimately. It's how the perception.
Well, technically, from my understanding, and this is something I read somewhere, and I apologize if there's someone who disagrees, but I heard that during the Cold War, the Russians were actually in a better position in the 1960s to deal with the United States, but America had a better propaganda arm, and in so doing, made the Soviets think that they were not as tough as America was, like in that type of thing, and that can be done with media, for certain.
Well, you remember Khrushchev beating on the table. The UN was the UN, right? Yeah, remember him?
We were talking about that one day that you wake up and realize you know all of the Russian premiers' names, all going back to Khrushchev, and you're like, why do I know this?
Right. Right.
Well, it's even today. I mean, you look at Russia today, the various Russian media, which are doing a great job of giving real news, and you can see that everything they're doing is aimed at making an impression in the international media. It's like they realize that the Western media dominates everywhere, and they see they have to compete with it in its own terms in many ways, which is kind of strange. It's like,
well, it's also why you can't trust Russian news to report about Russia fairly. You can always find them to be talking about getting to the dirtiest parts of the United States news or the dirtiest parts of Europe's news, because that's, they're going to do that. And the vice versa, by the way, vice versa. So in that sense, I kind of like that they're on the field. I kind of like that Al Jazeera is on the field. I kind of like, but like I said, you have to, it's best not to, once they get closer to their own home, it's going to be more slanted. I think that's the same with all news.
Well, but not to the same extent at all as in America. Like, for instance, once a year, Putin sits up there and against a big, diverse audience, and answers all kinds of questions. And like he'll talk about, we're really trying to fight. There's lots of corruption. We're really trying to fight it. It's a hard battle, And he's very open about the problems Russia has and what they're trying to do about it. And he's like appealing to lower level officials to please be more responsible and things like that. It's just stuff you would never, ever hear in an American. From American.
It's true, it's great. I mean,
at the same time, though, he's still only doing one news conference a year compared to every day in the USA. As much as they are crazy and like a bunch of people walking around with chickens like their heads cut off.
But I mean, I mean, if you think about the tone of each of them, it's we're just frenetic nuts, and he's like a voice of sanity. You know?
Well. I don't know. I don't think I can go there. I don't think I could say necessarily a voice of sanity. I say a counter voice.
If you think it, just forget. Well, forget now. Just this is how I see it from what I've viewed, which is limited, but maybe not that limited.
Sure.
But it's like the idea of how he approaches the situation is to approach it as it comes off. My imperative is honesty and balance ultimately, and it's like I don't get any of that from our media. It's just outrage. All we get is outrage. You know?
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that the economics of news in America. It's change news, like from Cronkite to now type of stuff. You know what I mean? So
well, what I would suggest is spend a little bit of time looking at RT.
I do. RT is a great place to get news from. As long as, like I said, the closer you get to Russia, they're not going to say something that's going to completely, say, Putin, he killed a bunch of people with poison. You're not going to get that from RT. But at the same time,
he didn't.
I don't
that's
know.
That's fake news.
Number one, that's a bothersome meme, and we're above that. I do understand that you don't believe it, and I don't know what to believe. So I'm just leaving it at that. I'm obviously not able to argue with you on that point. I just meant that, it just makes sense that they're just not going to, they're not necessarily Pravda, they're just not going to rock the boat that's paying them. It's like the biting the hand that feeds you type stuff. That's all I meant. Nothing necessarily sinister, but I've heard.
Well, besides RT, there's also the Duran, D-U-R-A-N.
Yeah.
That's another one to look at because it isn't a Russian-supported channel. It's an independent. It identifies with Russia, but it's it does get closer to Russian stuff.
I like getting news from lots of different places, but you're right. When you go down to the USA, you're going to. I have to filter that. And of course it depends on which filter they're looking through as well. So you have two filters to go through. I like that there seems to be less of a filter with RT in that sense. BBC, however, seems odd now. I've caught them in many fishy things, so I'm not really comfortable with them. Still okay with the CBC.
Well, one way to look at it is that there's been a Western narrative which totally dominated up until we started getting the RT phenomenon happening.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
And that narrative was just totally propaganda. Everything the West does is good, and it was good to bomb Yugoslavia,
I'm not cool
all
with that.
these. It was just really propaganda, and then suddenly they're confronted with a media which, I'll go along with your hypothesis, that tells the truth about the U.S., even though maybe it didn't about Russia itself. I'll accept that for the second. And so suddenly they've got to contend with real news against their propaganda. And that's, I think, one of the main reasons for the Russia-phobia is we've got to stop Americans from looking at the truth, get them to hate Russia so that only us French people will tune into Russia, and that the vast majority will reject it as fake news.
I find a lot of that
I
is
think
probably
they were
true.
caught off guard. It feels like it to me. They were caught off guard with the shift of the media. They thought they would have everyone. And, I watched it out here in the '90s where all the heavy media mogul areas were just diving into my properties on the net, and it was like, it'll go AOL and CompuServe, and it ended up being like that Sorcerer's Apprentice, where okay, here's all your brooms, you created them, now you're in trouble. You can't control them.
Now, I don't like everything on Duran. That article down there is CNN creating civil war.
Inflammatory, right? But
I looked at the article, and I think that the title is sort of good. CNN is creating all kinds of divisiveness, but the article is full of praises of Trump and how the economy is better off under Trump, and the tariffs are a good idea. And I think that's bullshit stuff.
Yeah.
Well, he is doing quite well in that regard, but we don't know if it's policy lag or what's really going on there.
But the game is the money. The money comes from one place, and it's like they just play the other side, and just to make sure that there's as much tension as possible.
One of the reasons
the thing is that I'm sorry to interrupt again. I'll shut up after this. But it's like if the Western media has been projecting a false narrative, then the Russian media has every incentive to be as honest and truthful as they possibly can be,
or at least appear that way. Certainly.
Yeah, well, I even claim they are. But I agree that you don't have to agree with that at all.
Uh-huh. No, they definitely have the appearance.
Like in the Cuban Revolution. In the Cuban Revolution, when the guerrillas were fighting the whatever his name was, the dictator of the time. Their policy was we should always tell the truth as revolutionaries, so that we'll be believed by the people, and let the government be the one to tell lies and exaggerate.
Right. Which as soon as they get power, they start lying.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah,
I have a lot of respect for Cuba myself, but that's a whole other story.
I'm
I've even gone so far as to say Cuba has the only democratic system in the world, because the way it works is at the community level, the community actually gets together and decides on policy, and then sends a representative up, representing their consensus, which is how democracy should work.
Oddly, that's literally, what was it, anarcho-syndicalism or socialism in certain cases, but they ended up with
a dictator. Yeah.
No, they didn't.
No,
no.
He's not a dictator. He's really more a foreign representative of the Cuban people, and
he's like a king
and a spiritual leader.
He's a king.
He's like a spiritual leader.
Well, yes, but
he has to listen to these councils that come up from the population, and
Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting there going, "Oh my God, I love Fidel." I just meant that you're right, though, Richard. There's the way that he set it up is he set up basically just like in Canada, the Queen technically runs the whole show, but she doesn't. She just has to abide by the rules. Technically, the President of America is supposed to be your quote-unquote elected king, but he's not supposed to be in charge. The two houses are supposed to be in charge and fighting each other. Not the king is just supposed to arbitrate or enact policy, executively.
Regardless of how brutal a regime he might have had, as certain people claim, I don't think that's the case. But to my mind, I believe this is true. The United States many times tried to topple the Cuban regime, right?
There's movies about it, yes.
Okay, now if the people did not support him enough, right, out of their own free will, he would have been toppled. He's the longest sitting person. Meaning, what I'm implying here is, regardless of what we think of it, and that tells me that a large enough percentage of the Cuban people, probably the majority, really supports what they're doing. So kind of what Richard explained.
Yeah, they do. Now, there is lots of dissatisfaction about the privations they suffer under the American blockade or whatever. Yeah. Embargo, yeah. So I mean, there are like I have a friend who went to Cuba, and he said, like the doctors are really angry they can't become taxi drivers instead because the taxi drivers make more money. You know, so there's those kind of complaints, but that's really due to the embargo more than the system. So that it takes a lot of support for the system to overcome those economic complaints.
Actually, if you really want to hear, the coolest thing about what happened to them is that Batista, that's his name, just flash on the screen. He's a real, like, I mean, if there was the definition of the word asshole would be a picture of him almost, I'm sure. But what he did was he was basically working with American companies to subjugate the people so that they could basically be slaves working for, you know, the United Fruit Company and stuff like that. And that's not how they wanted to roll. So they had 70 men, 7-0, that was it. And they toppled that regime with that because the people were on their side. So
it's amazing, yeah.
And they got attacked with, like the Bay of Pigs, they got attacked with terrorist acts. The factories were blown up. Planes were shot out of the air. Like and this is what they were going through. We didn't hear about this. This is the 1960s, but, you know, you can find it later. The CIA had a field day with these guys. So to think that they're going to like just roll over and say, yes, I love everything. No, they see this as just like North Korea in a way. They see this as like to them, like in North Korea, the United States killed 1/3 of their population off. Like that's like millions and millions of people. You couldn't throw a stone without seeing someone who was lost 2, 3, 4 family members type of thing. So
that's right.
So to them, they were fighting an unbelievably godlike power. So they needed, you know, this is the fear creates the situation they're in. Cuba has a different ball game, but the same result though. They don't want to go back there. They would rather eat crap than go and take a handout knowing what happened last time. You know, type of thing. And that's how they feel. You know, I'm sure. Don't get me wrong. I might be wrong.
Yes.
You know, but
I think you're right. But let me one more thing about Castro is that when the revolution ended, at that point, Castro was, you might say, a king, someone with total power, and
he gave it away all the time.
And he used that to try to create a self-governing system in Cuba. He used his power for good, not to increase his own power, but to empower the Cuban people.
But I bet you he does some shitty things.
And that's the opposite of what like Lenin and Trotsky and those, you know, the Bolsheviks used it to empower the Communist Party as a dictatorship party. But Castro used it to, the Communist Party is the institution involved, but he tried to make it a democratic institution rather than a autocratic institution. So he did have all that power, but he used it for good,
or at least tried.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
a lot of what happened.
Justin Trudeau is that really his son?
Yeah, could be.
I think so.
What?
Have you ever seen?
There's like a little meme.
There's a lot. There's a lot of ideas that Justin Trudeau is Fidel's son.
It was well known that Pierre Elliott Trudeau and his wife were notorious swingers. So every time they went somewhere, whatever country they went to, that they would be, you know, like it's said that she had sex with Mick Jagger and they were, you know, they had sex with JFK and all that sort of crap. You know, so I don't.
Well, in the case of JFK and Mick Jagger, I wouldn't doubt any allegations.
You see what I mean? Yeah, so, you know.
Yeah.
I read a biography of Kennedy Dynasty. Oh, and Jack was just totally irresponsible sexually. I mean, he had all kinds of problems with the FBI, and you know,
he was bringing hookers into the White House. So.
Yeah, and he was sleeping with some kind of Soviet agent at one point, and you know all that. So the FBI was on his case a lot.
Yeah.
Calm down, Jack. And Jack said, well, when it comes to my sex life, I refuse to be constrained.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. That whole family is that way, apparently.
Oh, Ted was the biggest pervert, yeah.
It's nice that we're dragging ourselves through the 1960s here.
Yeah,
it seems that's what we're doing.
Well, here's your current day. Here's the ramification of it. I think there's a pretty good argument just from a look and feel thing.
Well, the thing is that there's actually the guy, that Prince that just got married, for example. There is the talk that he looks a lot like one of what's her name's Princess Di's friends. You know what I mean?
Faid, you mean?
No. It wasn't. It was another friend, a redheaded gentleman, and it looks just like his other son, right? So that type of thing, But at the same time, it doesn't make any difference at all. You can, even if it's true.
Oh, yes, it does.
Oh, really?
I think so.
So what? Justin Trudeau is going to have good relations with Cuba? We already have good relations with Cuba.
There's just
no. Come on. When World War I broke out, it's like the Kaiser and the Queen of England were cousins or something, or brothers. I don't know.
Those deep ties have they're like graphene.
But he still never went down to hang out with him or anything. He's still the son of and talks and lauds his father copiously. He's still the person who raised his son.
I'm speaking as someone who's experienced this firsthand. There's very strong ties to what your natural ancestry is.
Sure, but he's dead.
I'm just. There's a very, very deep conversation there.
Well, I still don't think it's going to
for another time.
I just don't know what it would change. I just,
Well, I have experience with it, and I could share with you. But I think it's inappropriate for the electric universe conversation.
Fair enough.
Now, to say Justin Trudeau is the father of Castro is sort of like saying Elvis is still alive.
The other way around. Yeah.
I don't think it's as far fetched. I don't think it's as far fetched as Elvis is still alive.
Oh, okay. Well, just because I never heard it before. It just sounds
left field. No. It's actually quite a meme. But there's been a lot written about it, etc. Implications. It's implications, of course.
Well, yeah. Okay.
That's still wonderful. Wonderful conversation, guys. Please go on.
Yeah, great. I'll tell you what. I'm a little crunched, unfortunately. But do you think we have a show?
Oh, I'm sure. But we didn't.
Great show.
But we didn't talk about
it. From Boscovich to Putin to Castro. I think it's a great show.
God, our brains.
Flow of consciousnesses are great. I mean, this is let it go, and they're really fun. Thanks for everyone for putting their energy and participation into it.
Yeah.
Wherever it's going, it's certainly going somewhere, and I think we're all just along for the ride. But there's this positive energy exploration.
Well,
I'm to it. I'm having fun with it.
450 views in the last 24 or last 48 hours. So.
I think we're on we got the foundation now. Now it's like let's ride it.
Yeah, feel free to spread it around if you see anything that looks like. I mean, we've done a lot of shows on different things, and some of them. Plus, we're going to have some better guests on. I shouldn't say better. We're going to have guests on.
Well, no, they're better in the sense that if we get somebody on with a really popular name.
Walt Thornhill will be joining us.
Up our views.
Stormy Daniels.
Walt Thornhill will be joining us. Phil will be joining us for his presentation.
Well, Sheldrake
would be awesome.
Okay,
and by the way,
I'm not going to even pretend that we could do that.
What's that? I bet we may be able to. I think we can get is John Reed.
Sure.
Well, look, Sheldrake came to Bath.
Yes,
and there he was chatting with everyone, and I got to chat with him. I mean,
he's a big proponent of the EU, actually.
We may be able to. So I actually have a project to get in touch with him. So
we have Eileen McClusick, whose name I'm going to have to pronounce over and over again until I get it right, and Julian West will be joining us. In September, late September.
Okay.
And he does Myths Are History, the webpage, and basically all about Saturnian and Jupiter and all that type of stuff, like all the mythos. He studies mythos like his entire library. I've been to his house. His library is just filled with like old books, like from the Kabbalah to whatever, and he talks to actual rabbis and stuff to actually figure out the nature of some of these events.
He's absolutely knowledgeable on that stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah. He makes me realize I know nothing. Like when I talk to him,
he's a true scholar. That's what he is.
It's the same thing. Like I recognize that Edwin here knows way more about the molecules than I do. I am trained to do EE stuff. I work in this realm. The past, it's him. He'll come to people like us to go, what about this? What about that? Can this even happen? And he's being thorough. It's very thorough. So
good. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Of course, the flip side of history is myth. Myth is history is what you said, right?
Yeah.
I heard.
Myths are history.
The flip side is history is myth. Like Chomsky, people like that would, we talk about what we're taught as history in school. A lot of that is myth.
Actually, we talk about that a lot too. Yeah.
And a lot of myth, and a lot of stuff that I considered myth, I now more or less regard as a true story.
Yeah,
me too. There you go.
This is interesting.
And it makes me believe
two different definitions of myth.
Watch this. The breakdown of the words.
So it kind of makes me believe in the Old Norse gods, meaning Wodan, the guy that throws with thunderbolts, because now I realize, that's more or less a reality.
Yeah. Instant petrification. Yeah.
yeah. I'll be a good boy, Wodan.
Zorch.
Four is the other name.
And we know that these events, we know they occur. Just to imagine even if we increase the amount of lightning strikes across the planet by the times 100, like 2 orders of magnitude, we still wouldn't die all that often.
No.
Even if we increase, but what I'm just saying is that we can imagine, though, that they would be more common.
Well, no, but lightning is something that goes between clouds and the Earth. But the kind of stuff we're talking about there is more lightning bolts that go from Mars to the Earth. I mean, it's a whole different kind of...
Oh, sure,
it's an arc discharge, but it's a totally different kind of thing.
But from the person's point of view who is running across the landscape, if you're running across the landscape with your friend and suddenly he's turned into a pillar of stone and zapped by a giant lightning bolts and literally turned to stone or whatever,
wow,
then you would assume that Wodan hated him, and you wouldn't know it didn't come directly from him, but still,
right?
You'd infer that by,
maybe if you start getting
so we've taken another turn.
Okay, here's left turn. Yeah,
maybe one wore rubber shoes.
Maybe there was a little bit of anger being expressed, who
knows?
I think most of the survivors were in caves.
I think that you're right. I've heard some amazing stories. There's one, besides just caves, a place that involves caves was in Peru, and they were crawling across the ground. There's a ritual that they do every year that they crawl across the ground for 5 miles on their bellies to get to this cave system. And you would wonder why you do that, but you wouldn't wonder if you realized if you stood up, you're going to get hit by lightning.
Ooh,
you would just lie. You would just go right across the ground as on your belly to get to that cave. Anyone who stood up gets zapped. It's a large flat field.
To survive all these centuries is like amazing.
But amazes me then that it almost says that the people who survived that event were these people. And those are the ones who came out of those caves later and said, we didn't die,
right.
And so to them, that was a reenactment of the suffering. That's just, that's like a funeral for all the people that died in a way, a memorial,
Very good.